sure you've heard about the tragic fate that El Chapo's son, Edgar Guzman Lopez, faced in his final hours. But what triggered such a brutal murder in broad daylight at a crucial moment for him? The Sinaloa Cartel, recognized as one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in the world, had a possible heir in Edgar. Born on May 30th, 1986, he was prepared from an early age to follow in the criminal footsteps of his father, El Chapo. Raised on a ranch in Jesus Maria, Edgar grew up under the tutelage of the cartel leader and was said to have even supervised drug operations as a teenager. Despite being the heir to a ruthless empire, he was known for his humility and ambition. His education included studies at a government school, and he aspired to obtain a degree in business administration. Edgar represented a new generation of drug traffickers, known as the Narco Juniors, who, unlike their predecessors, sought to be educated in the best schools, sometimes even abroad, to understand more about the business. With his father's trust, he was appointed as the next leader of the Sinaloa Cartel. However, his life was tragically cut short at the age of 22. On May 8, 2008, close to Mother's Day, while preparing to surprise his mother, Edgar went to the shopping center in Culiacan, Sinaloa, accompanied by his cousin Cesar Aria Lara and his friend Arturo Mesa Cazares, Blanca's son. Margarita Cazares, known as the Empress, designated by the United States government as a money launderer for the Sinaloa Cartel. It was at that time and place when the life of the prince of drug trafficking was tragically cut short. 3 individuals left the shopping center and headed towards the parking lot when they were surprised by a deafening roar and a terrifying scene. A sign high on the wall burst into flames after being hit by a rocket launcher. More than 40 people armed to the teeth, carrying AK-47 rifles and bulletproof vests, emerged from their vehicles with lethal intentions. The 3 young men tried to flee towards their 2 trucks, one of which was armored, but their efforts were in vain. Without warning, the attackers unleashed a hail of bullets at close range, firing more than 500 rounds at the defenseless victims. As their lives were extinguished, the ruthless criminals quickly fled in their vans, leaving behind the unrecognizable bodies of the 3 individuals in a pool of blood. Edgar's death is presented as a more complex enigma than one could imagine. Additional information on this is promised later. In any case, the news of Edgar's death shocked the entire nation. The overwhelming pain that overwhelmed Edgar's father, known as El Chapo, was so deep that he ordered the purchase of all the roses available in Culiacan for his son's funeral. This action left sellers without the opportunity to replace the flowers for Mother's Day. However, Chapo's grief was too great to consider the needs of others at the time. During the funeral, a prominent Mexican artist performed a corrido titled "Zero Zero Rosas" from El Chapo's perspective, describing his immense pain. "My son, my source of happiness and sadness. Thank God I will miss you. You are my confidant, my handwrite." Edgar's mother, on the other hand, was mired in indignation. He spoke to Mexican media expressing his frustration over his children's constant association as drug traffickers. She was exhausted from being linked to her husband's reputation and longed to distance herself and her family from that stigma. As for the population of Sinaloa, they also feared possible reprisals and consequences for the death of their son. For this reason, they decided voluntarily to establish a curfew and confine themselves within the safety of their homes. For a period of time, the question that tormented everyone was who would end the life of the son of a man known for getting rid of his enemies using unforgiving acid. Maybe it would be someone on a mission, carrying out an unavoidable order in a web of violence. Initially, responsibility for Edgar's death was attributed to the Juarez cartel, given the intense struggle between the Juarez and Sinaloa cartels in Culiacan and Navalado. It made sense, since these drug trafficking empires provided a plausible explanation. However, the son's widow, Frida Muñoz Roman, publicly declared that the perpetrators of the murder were hitmen linked to the Beltran Leyva brothers. You may be wondering who exactly these Beltran Leyva brothers are and why they would seek the death of Chavo's son. Hector Alfredo and Arturo, the Beltran Leyva brothers, were notorious figures in the Mexican underworld. Although they gained power in the mid-1980s, in the following decades they remained largely secondary players in the drug trade. Arturo Beltran Leyva led the family, and he, along with his brothers, acted as hitmen for El Chapo, eventually becoming his business associates. However, when El Chapo was imprisoned in a maximum security prison, the brothers helped ensure his imprisonment until El Chapo finally escaped in 2001. The situation changed when one of the brothers, Alfredo, was arrested in early 2008, at which time in which Arturo accused Chapo of having handed him over, thus marking the official separation between the brothers and Chapo. They abandoned the Sinaloa Cartel to establish their own organization, allying themselves with the Sinaloa Cartel's biggest rivals, including the Zetas. This decision sparked a series of deadly territorial conflicts, and the brothers, especially Arthur, became notorious for their grotesque bloodlust. Just a few months later, Edgar was murdered, and many suspected it was not simply a coincidence. However, that was only one of two theories. The second theory suggests that those responsible for Edgar's death were under the leadership of one of his father's collaborators. An anonymous sniper from the Sinaloa Cartel told a Mexican newspaper that Edgar's death was a mistake. This is known because, although mistakes happen, sometimes they are no one's fault. They still must be paid for. In this case, only death can cover this mistake. El Chapo is alleged to have ordered the execution of a young man named Israel Rincon, also known as El Gacho, due to his association with the Beltran brothers. The responsibility of carrying out this operation fell on Gonzalo and his acquaintances, such as El Macho, a main assassin of Ismael El Mayo Zambada, partner and co-founder of the Sinaloa Cartel, along with El Chapo. Communications, directives, and queries were exchanged via radios, setting the stage for the impending tragedy. Fate also played a cruel hand, as El Macho was present at the same mall as Edgar and his friends on that fateful night. It was approximately 8:30 at night. Darkness had enveloped the city, and when the three young men left the shopping center, El Macho mistakenly assumed that they were El Gacho and his associates. Without hesitation, he ordered his men to open fire, turning the entire situation into a catastrophic case of mistaken identity. Many people believe this is the most likely possibility, as it was later discovered that the weapon used in the murders closely resembled the one El Macho preferred. I can't help but wonder about the torment that must have consumed El Chapo upon learning that his beloved son had become the victim of an order he himself had issued. You don't wonder about Chapo's revenge actions after his son's death. Technically, he didn't do anything initially, and his late response left everyone stumped. A Mexican journalist even commented that the leader of the Sinaloa Cartel seemed to have adopted a compassionate gesture after the loss of his son, given that there were no reprisals. With everything that is known about El Chapo, do you really think he is someone who just sits idle? I definitely don't. Death comes for everyone, as it happened shortly after the death of Edgar Arturo Beltran Leyva. After learning that the authorities of Mexico and the United States were searching for him intensely, he went into hiding. However, it wasn't long before he was found. On December 16, 2009, Arturo Beltran Leyva was confronted by 200 Mexican Marines, a Navy helicopter, and 2 armored army vehicles in a shootout that lasted around 4 hours. Finally, Arturo was killed, and his body was left at the scene with multiple wounds. But wait, this is not all. On December 8, 2013, a special group of hundreds of sailors and federal police assaulted the city where the Macho was suspected of hiding. After securing his residence, they unleashed a relentless hail of gunfire on the home. The confrontation lasted for hours with an exchange of intense fire until the male was finally shot down. Don't you find it strangely similar that both men were murdered in an identical manner? I wonder if these similarities are simply a coincidence or if they are indicative of Chapo's possible involvement in both cases. After all, Chapo is known to have connections that reach even the Mexican police. From my point of view, Chapo could have decided to avenge his son by coordinating his henchmen without directly getting his hands dirty. He ordered the actions that sealed Edgar's fate, and it was also his order that condemned those suspected of having life in their hands. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, do not hesitate to like it, subscribe for more similar content, and and leave us in the comments what topics you would like us to address. That's all for today, researchers.